Hello everyone, thank you for joining in. In our previous video, we learned how to write a class in C++. In this video, we'll take a further step from there to package the same class code so that our program looks more compact and easy to read. The objective of today's video is to introducing the concept of header file, which will hold the class implementation, and in another file we'll have that header file included to use the class functionalities. We will also see in this video how we can leverage the concept of function signature to have even more compact implementation of a class. It is useful to spend some time on these topics discussed in this video because the code implementation in this video is pretty much a standard practiced by the C++ programmers today. So without further delay, let's get started with our code implementation. Okay, so this is more or less the implementation that we had of the complex number class in our last video, where we have our complex number class described here, and then in the main function we had created three objects of that class type and then we used complex print, which is a member function of the class, to print the real and imaginary part of the complex number objects. So far so good. So in today's video, what we'll do is we'll take this class implementation from this class_basic.cpp file, and from there we'll create another file and paste this class code into that file. So we'll first create another file called, suppose, complexcls.h, which will be the header file, and then we'll cut this class implementation from the class_basic cpp file and paste it inside the complexclass.h header file. So now that we have our class implemented here, we also need this hash include iostream and using namespace stdlines to be included in this file. Okay, now that we have our header file ready, we need now to include that header file into the class_basic.cpp file. So what we do here, we will type the complexcls.h, which is the file name, header file name that we just created, and looks like we are done. So we now will check whether the code compiles or not. So for that we can type g++-std is equal to c++11 -w-o, then the name of the executable, which we will provide as class_basic, and then the name of the source file in our case, which is class_basic.cpp. So as you can notice that while compiling this code, we are not providing the name of the header file, because whenever we are trying to compile class_basic.cpp, which will automatically include the header file, and then the code will be compiled. Okay, so there is an error. So it says this file doesn't exist. Maybe we have so we have a typo here because a should not be there. And let's try to compile the code again, and it compiles. So let's now run the executable, which is class_basic, and we can see that these are the same output that we had seen in our last video about the class implementation in C++. So far so good again. So now what we'll do is we will further try to make this code look compact and cleaner by just describing the member method's signature in the class, and then the body of those member functions will be described at the end of the class. By that I mean that we'll copy this member function. I'll showing now with just one member function, and then we'll come down at the end of the class implementation, and after that we'll use the class name to identify which class this function belongs to using the class name and the scope resolution operator, then the name of the member function, and the body of that member function is described here. Okay, now that we have our member function defined, we'll remove the implementation of that constructor and we'll only be implementing the signature of that constructor. We also have another constructor defined here. In this constructor also we'll just have the function signature here, but before that let me copy that function and paste at the bottom, and then we also need to have this part, that is the class name and the scope resolution operator. And we'll again go back to the top. We just need to describe the function signature and we'll remove the body of that function implementation. Okay, we can do this for all the other functions. Let's do it one after another. So we'll copy this, paste here, and we do not need the implementation again. And let's do the same for all the remaining class methods. But remember, we need to include the scope resolution operator before all the functions so that compiler identifies that which class these member methods belong to. So in the constructors we do not have any kind of return type, but whenever in other functions we have return type, like in here we have the get real function has return type int, get image img imaginary in a part, so get img method also has return type int. In those cases we first have the return type and then we have the class name and scope resolution operator followed by the name of the member method. Okay, I hope it's clear. Again, for the destructor method we do not have any kind of we do not have any kind of return type, so for that we'll just go in front of the class name and paste the function name, and before that we'll paste the class name and the scope resolution operator. Okay, so this looks okay for the implementation part, and then we just need to do some work on cleaning up or removing the bodies of these functions from inside the class. Okay, so we have our compact class representation here. As we can see that the entire class is described here and all the class methods are described at the bottom. So this makes this class more readable. So instead of looking all the details in the bodies of these function implementations, we can see that we have a very nice and compact view of the class variables and class methods, and whenever we need to go into detail for any class methods, we can always find out their body in here at the end of the class. So this makes the class implementation more compact. Okay, so we'll now check whether that code compiles. We have some error and we are missing a const here. And it compiles. Okay, so that is something important to keep in mind, that we have our class implementation here. However, we did not put the class member method bodies into here. Instead, we have had their implementation at the end of the class. And then we also have seen that the compilation protocol is still the same, and we will now try to execute the executable that's been created by at the end of the compilation of the code, and we see that we still have the right outputs from the code. Okay, now we'll go one step further, and what we'll do now is we'll take the class implementations from this header file to another CPP file which will have the same name as this header file. However, the extension of that file will be CPP. Let's do that. So we'll first create another file called complex cls.cpp, and in that file we will copy all the implementations that we had for the class methods and paste them inside this CPP file. However, be careful to name this CPP file same as the header file. Otherwise, this header file will not be able to identify the corresponding CPP file. And after that, we also need to have this header file included in this complex cls.cpp. So for that, we need to perform this include complex cls.h here. Okay, let's see if we can compile or not. So we'll try to compile the code, and we see that we have bunch of identified reference here. It is because when we asked C++ to compile this class basic code, it just included the complex cls.h file during the compilation, so it just included this file. However, it somehow did not identify that the corresponding complex cls.cpp file. So instead of that, we need to compile both the CPP files. So we need to compile complex cls.cpp as well. And when we do that, we see that we do not have any error anymore, because we have now compiled both the CPP files and all the dependencies are met. So we are good here. Let's now run the executable and see what is the output. And we see that yes, we have the right output again. So that completes our objective for this video. So in this video, once again, just to summarize, we had a class and then we splitted that class into two files. One is in the header file where we have the class with its member variables and the signature of its member methods. Then the body of those class methods were described is in another CPP file which has the same name as the header file. And while compiling that code, we also need to compile the CPP file corresponding to the class method implementations. And that completes this video. I hope you liked it. Thank you for watching.